Okay, so now we've had a little introduction to what Ansible actually is and why we're using it in the networking space. What we're going to do, we're going to now install Ansible. There's a couple of ways we can do this. We can either install it globally by using the sudo apt command. However, a lot of the time you don't want to be installing your packages and your programs in your global environment. So what we're going to do, we're going to install it in our virtual environment. And I've created a virtual environment. I've called it myself, Richard Killeen. As you can see here, it's on there. And the reason we do this is that anything that we install via pip or the Python, package manager, is local only to the virtual environment, so it won't cause any problems with anything that you actually have in your global operating system. So let's get cracking and let's get this installed so we can get Ansible up and running. So it's Python 3 space m, so pip install Ansible, and we'll just let that carry on and download the packages that it needs to do. It won't take very long. It will include the Ansible core, it will include the roles that are required and a lot of the parsers that are needed as well. Okay, so we can see it's now been installed. So we can confirm this by going Ansible version. And we can see what we have here. Okay, so we see we don't have a config file, which we will need to actually put in. But we can see that it is now installed. So what we can start doing, we can start having a look at get our config file up and running, and we can actually then get our host file up and running and see if we can maybe connect to something. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my GitHub page, go to my repo, which is fully free for anyone to use anytime they want, and I'm just going to copy an example Ansible config file. All it basically states is where our host file is, where it's located, and as we can see here with this, it means that the host is in the same directory, which is fine. And it does things like, because this is a lab environment, it takes off the host key check-in for SSH, and it has a load of the ciphers in there that are needed for SSH connectivity, because some of the older networking devices, especially some of the older Cisco networking devices, don't use the same MAC ciphers or algorithms as the newer devices, so you can run into some problems. So I include them within the actual Ansible config file itself to alleviate this particular problem. Okay, so let's copy this out and we'll create our Ansible config file. Okay, so let's do a nano and we do ansible.cfg, and I'm just going to paste that in there, then do a Control-O to write it and Control-X to come out. Now if we run a Ansible version now, we should see that there's a config file, because as we can see here before it said none. So let's do the version, and as we can see we now have a Ansible config file. That's fantastic. So if we do an ls on here, we can see that we've got the virtual environment and we have the Ansible config file. What we need to do now is to create our host file. This is a list of all the devices that we have or that we're going to use. You can have individual host files for different sets of devices if you like, but we're going to quickly create a small host file and then we'll start working on that. So to create our host file, we of course need to have a network to run it against. So I have a basic network automation lab that I've set up. And of course, within the GitHub itself, there will be links to this, and you can download the EVE-NG topology for it as well. So basically we've got 4 routers, Manchester, London, America and Asia, and we've got 3 switches in there as well. Now these are connected all to a central management, so we can manage these remotely on our machines. The reason we're using a nice little image like this is because otherwise the lab looks like that, and it's a bit of a disaster, so we use the image to make it look somewhat better. Okay, so if we jump over to the GitHub page, we can see that we have the Ansible host file already there. It's got some details already in. What we're looking for is things like the management IP addresses, and what we're also looking for is, you see here, routers vars. Now they're the variables. So basically I've set on each of these devices the username of just YouTube, password of YouTube1. We're telling Ansible that the SSH connection is on port 22, and the type of connection it's going to use is the network CLI. So when we're building our host files, you can go really quite in depth with how you want to do them. So in this case, I have a section just called routers, and I've linked all the 4 routers in there. I have a section called switches as well, and I've linked all the switches there. So within your playbooks, which we'll have a look at shortly, what you can do if you want to, you don't have to connect to all the devices at once, because we have a host name, i.e. London, Manchester, Asia and America, and we have the details there. We can just reference one particular host that we want to connect to. So if we wanted to connect to, say, just Manchester, then we would say Manchester as the device we're going to connect to, and it would look at the host files, and it would take the actual Ansible host, i.e. the IP address, and then it would take the variables from it as well, and it will attempt to connect. Now, if we wanted to, we could use the connection as just routers, in which case it will connect to everything that's in that routers, in which case it's all of these 4 devices. We could also use the flag as all, in which case it will connect to everything that's here. It will connect to the routers, the switches, the servers. Now, the switches and servers we'll do at a later date. We're not doing them just yet. In fact, the servers haven't even been provisioned at the moment, but once I provision them, then we will go through them as well. And of course, you can then turn around and say, well, what I want to do, I want to add another group in. I want to add a group for UK, for argument's sake, and in which case you could create a group called UK, and you can put in there just the London and Manchester. So you just list London and Manchester. We'll do that in another video. So if we want to just change UK stuff, let's say for argument's sake, we want to use a specific username and password just for the UK sides, or we want a particular banner or something that's specific just to that region, then we can make sure that when we're putting our changes in, it only affects the ones that are in the region that we're doing. But anyway, let's create on our server, our Ansible server, I should say, our host files. So I'm just going to copy these out. Don't forget, this is on my GitHub. So if you want it, take it. But if you're using it, then you're going to probably have to change. Not probably, you will have to change the IP addresses, whatever you happen to assign your devices itself. So let's jump into our command line and get this created. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're now going to create our host file. So we're just going to do a nano hosts, and let's just paste that in. Did we get everything? Let's just double check. Yes, we did. Control O, Control X. Okay, it's doing ls now, and now we can see that we have our host file as well as our Ansible file. And if you remember from earlier on, our Ansible file referenced the host as in being in the same directory. You don't have to do this. You can create multiple different host files that you want. You can name them practically whatever you like, and you can reference this when you're calling your actual playbook. You can say, I want to run this playbook, but I want to run it against this particular host file. You don't have to use the standard one, but for ease of demonstration, we'll just use the basics. Okay, that's great. So what we need to do now, we need to create our playbook. Now our playbook is the actual instruction set. So what we've done so far, we've got the basics of the Ansible config. This gives some rudimentary basics of how Ansible is to work. We've created our host file, which has the devices that we actually want to connect to, and it's got the connectivity details, username and password, which is a bad thing. In the future, you'll use things like Ansible Vault to secure your passwords, but again, in the lab environment, we don't mind them being in plain text. So now what we need to do, we need something to actually use these details. So Ansible uses what's called the playbooks. So the playbooks is a set of instructions that it will use to actually run against these devices. So again, that's what we want. Okay, so if we go on to Ansible and we have our playbooks, we have our first playbook that's in here. First playbook, add login banner. So basically, let's quickly run through this, how this actually works. So you have to have your name. You'll notice a little dash there. That's it to signify this is a YAML file. It has to have a name. You have to give it a name. So we've just called it configure router banner. Now, this is what I was discussing earlier on, where you decide what hosts you want to connect to. So because I've chosen routers, then it's going to connect to everything that's in the actual routers in the host. I can change this and just say America, Manchester, London, Asia, and it will connect to just those ones. Or I say, well, I want to do all the routers. So we put routers in there and it will connect to everything that's in that routers section of the host file. Now, the gather facts, you'll normally find when you're looking at your playbooks that the gather facts is set to no. Reason being is that if you don't include this, then when the playbook attempts to connect to each individual device, it will then try to poll as much data as it can, basically like doing an SNMP walk. To be fair, it pulls off so much data that it basically, that you don't want, and it basically increases the execution time by a lot. So now we have our tasks. This is what we want it to do. Now, the good thing with Ansible is that you can sit there and you can have as many tasks as you actually like. So you can put in a task to do the set the banner, a task to say set BGP neighborships. You can have as many as you want. You can link them all together within the same playbooks. Can get a bit complicated, when you're trying to read and edit playbooks if you have too many tasks, but they're easy to actually do that. So what we've got here is, so under our task, we've got the name. So we gave the task a name. We're telling it what module to use, in this case, which is iOS config module. And then we're giving it what lines we want it to do, in which case we just want it to add in a banner. Okay, so let's copy this out. I mean, I'm being lazy, really. I should actually sit there and write it, but I can't be bothered, to be fair, because I've written it before. But anyway, yeah, so let's jump in and create our first playbook on here. So let's do a nano, and let's do first -playbook. Normally you leave your naming conventions for your playbooks to be more in line with what they're supposed to be doing, but again, lab environment, we don't mind. And you start .yaml, so we're a YAML file. Okay, so just going to paste that in. Fantastic. All right, and let's do an ls. All right, so we have our playbook, we have our Ansible config, and we have our hosts. So what we're going to do now, we're going to have a little look and see if it will do anything. Should do. Okay, so let's run the playbook. And the good thing with Linux is that you can use the tab key to finish your command. So if there's anything within the current hierarchy that you're in, then it will be able to auto complete it for you. So let's just, for argument's sake, do ans, so ansible -pl playbook, and let's do first playbook.yaml. Let's have a look, see what happens with this. Okay, so it's trying to connect, and there we go. It's now telling us that it's this. Don't worry about the ansible pylib SSH. You can install that if you want to. Actually, it's probably quite a good idea. Pip install pylib SSH. Oh, did I spell that wrong? Oh, yeah, sorry, ansible py. Okay, so it's installed that, that's fine. So we won't get that error again next time. So basically what it said, it's told us that it's done a change on London. It's done a change on Asia and Manchester and America. And it's given us the output here. So we can see one OK, which means it's connected fine. It's actually changed something this time. Now, if we was to, for argument's sake, log on to one of the routers and have a look, where's my secure CRT? Here it is. Okay, and let's go end, and let's go. Actually, we'll SSH into it. To be fair, that'll probably be a better idea because it won't show from here. Let's do a enable show IP interface just to get the IP address, and there we go. All right, so let's do SSH, and it's YouTube at. Okay, you notice now we have our login banner has now been added. And the good thing is with Ansible is it's omnipotent. Did I pronounce that right? Anyway, what that means is that if you run a command and it's already on the device, so let's say for argument's sake, I run a command to add this particular banner, but the banner is already there, it's not going to do anything. So it won't actually make any changes. So for argument's sake, let's say you're trying to do a load of access list changes, and you put in, let's say, a particular IP address, let's say 10.10.10.12 for argument's sake, but that's already on the device in the access list that you're looking to change. It will just skip that. So let's have a little look, and let's run that command again and see what it actually does. So let's do let's run that command again. So it's looking to get in. You notice how we didn't get the actual error because we installed the ansible pylib SSH, which was great. But you notice how it didn't change anything. So it's connected to everything, which is fine, but it didn't make any changes whatsoever because what was there, we already had it. So let's do a cat show interfaces YAML. So here is another little YAML file. Again, all this doing here is it's going to show the interfaces on the routers. The host is choosing the routers itself. It's not going to gather the facts. It's just going to run the show IP interface brief command, but it's actually now, as we can see here, what it's going to do is going to register the output. So it's going to run the command, as we can see under the command there. It's going to register that output, and then it's going to display that output on the actual terminal. So let's see what happens with this. The Ansible playbook show interfaces.yaml, and we'll see what happens now. Okay, so as we can see, it's logged onto each device, and it's actually shown the interfaces that we actually have there. It's run that show IP interface brief command, and of course, as I said earlier on, we can add more and more tasks into this. So this was just a little sweetener, just a your first look into Ansible and how it can be used. We will expand upon this as the videos start to progress, and we'll get into a lot more in-depth configurations and playbooks and see what we can do with this. I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to Ansible, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.